Hello and welcome to our next panel discussion, which is on cloud, collaboration and connectivity. We'll be looking at a world of constant digital communication. I'm Andrew Palmer, the Executive Editor of The Economist. I'm very pleased to be joined by Kurt Garner, the Chief Technology Officer of Chipotle, and Antti Nivala, the Chief Executive Officer of M-Files, information management firm. Kurt, Antti, thank you so much for being with us. I'm going to start with you, Kurt, if I may, and just give us a sense of how the pandemic has accelerated or changed the digital transformation that I presume was already underway at Chipotle.
Well, hi, Andrew. Hi, Antti. It's nice to be with you today. Certainly, the pandemic accelerated our digital transformation, and I think it fundamentally changed the way people interact and engage with each other, and how they interact and how they engage with brands and companies, and what their expectations are of those interactions. We've had a strategy for a number of years now tied to access. Certainly, as a restaurant company, getting people more access to your brand is important. But a few years ago, we saw that access strategy evolving beyond the physical sense and looking at how people now expect to have not just a one-way communication with the company, but a two-way communication. And you see that across industries, not just Chipotle, where there's an expectation now that there's chat capabilities or an acceptance of bot technologies helping you through a problem or a question or an engagement with the brand. I think people are becoming more accustomed to and expecting to be known more by the companies that they do business with and looking for more information and engagement with those brands. So things like rewards platforms and loyalty platforms play a role. I also think people are evolving more towards looking for personalized care and experiences. I think what's happened in healthcare is a really exciting outcome in some of these changes that we've seen through the pandemic. And this ability now to not just present a customer with a static experience that's based upon what the masses want, but to do something that's more personalized and customized. And, at Chipotle, we're not a company where you walk into our restaurant and order a number one with the side and a drink. We've always been based upon this idea that you can combine ingredients into an outcome that works best for you. So this kind of mashup, if you will, between the changing in what people want in the physical experience and the acceptance and frankly, the acceleration of the pull for digital experiences has been a really exciting outcome for us. Our digital business was 20% coming into the pandemic. It got as high as 75% during the pandemic. It's now at 40%. And that 40% is holding strong even as people are returning to the dining rooms.
Yeah, I was expecting you, Kurt, as someone in the food business in the pandemic to be talking more about much more order activity going through mobile channels and pickup, et cetera, et cetera. So you've touched on that at the end. But what are the lasting changes that you've seen as a result of that kind of period of lockdown and presumably delivery of food?
Yeah, I think people are now understanding that they have different channels available to them based upon what their needs are at the time. So, for instance, coming into the pandemic, Chipotle had a bigger lunch business than dinner business, and it's because we're located next to places where people work or go to school. Now, with delivery and digital pickup becoming much more known and accepted, people are moving towards dinner occasions at Chipotle, which tend to tilt more towards the digital business. So it's become an and instead of an or for us. And I think we're not alone in that digital has now opened up new channels of engagement and commerce across a lot of industries.
Antti, let's come to you. You're in the business of managing information, and the pandemic was presumably a crash course in increasing the volume and complexity of information across the enterprises you work with. So what did you see and has it changed M-Files' approach to the future?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a big change even for us, even though we have always been in the business of digital transformation. That's what we do for our customers. We help them to be efficient and able to work in the digital work from anywhere world. But even for us, it was a big change and a really great test of our own ability to just actually make that work from anywhere reality in just one day, and worked really well for us. We were able to continue our own operations and help our customers continue their operations pretty much without any glitches. So I think if this had happened like 5 years, 10 years ago, it would have been a much more difficult challenge for all of us. Now, looking back, I think still what was the big change for us is that kind of turned upside down the default of where we work. Like it was previously, it was like we were talking about, do you sometimes work remotely? And now the default is remote work. And we ask questions like, have you been to the office lately? And I actually don't think that's going to change for us in any big way ever. Like probably the default will be working from wherever you like, and office is the exception.
Kurt, that clearly can't apply as much to a firm where the sort of physical location matters as much. So how are you seeing remote working, hybrid working within Chipotle?
We were fortunate, I guess, during the pandemic that we had already invested a lot in collaborative technologies, because beyond our restaurants, which of course are physical and require people to be there to serve guests, we've got a very large field organization. So teams that run multiple restaurants, all the way up to hundreds of restaurants, a facilities team that takes care of our restaurants, and a real estate team that's always on the road out looking for new sites and managing hundreds of construction projects a year. So we were already fairly distributed and had made those investments. I think our headquarters locations, as Antti said, were much more physically present within co-located work environments. We've certainly seen that change as well. And, I think Antti made a really good point around timing. It's not just the technologies that are in place now, it's the societal change. We moved in Web 2.0 from people being consumers of content to being creators of content, and being comfortable with that. If you think of something like TikTok and how powerful and popular that's become. So there was, I would say, a culture of collaboration via technology that was already occurring in the world. And that's what enabled many companies to make the pivot so successfully. Of course, that depends upon robust technologies. And of course, I think that depends on the democratization of information and understanding how you can have the data available to people to become those creators with one voice of truth.
So I guess one element of what we've been through is that there's been this surge of complexity in the amount of information that's flowing around enterprises. You can feel overloaded by multiple different channels. Everyone's suddenly moving to remote and now to hybrid. So, Antti, maybe you can talk us through this from given the business that you're in. How does one sort of make sense of and order the flow of information through enterprises when kind of locations are distributed, documentation has exploded, customers want personalization, as Kurt mentioned. It's just a much more complicated picture.
Yeah, something that I think was already happening was coming to a realization that there just are a lot of different data sources and repositories and systems, and maybe a few years ago enterprises were aiming at kind of unifying or consolidating everything into one place. And it's been our view for a long time that that's actually not a very good objective. It's like you will be limiting your business if you try to solve the complexity by consolidating everything to like one system, like one big suite. So we believe in a kind of distributed, flexible, agile information architecture where enterprises take advantage of the best of the breed tools for different departments or functions, but make sure that it's integrated and connected. And that's where M-Files plays a role in the industry, that we connect things, we connect different systems, and we connect information. We connect documents and other pieces of information to the business context, like customers, projects, cases. And to me, kind of that's the key to managing the complexity, that if you can manage what things are related to, instead of trying to kind of manage physical storage locations, then kind of that's how your brain also works. That's how employees think, like, I need information related to that new restaurant or that new agreement we made with that supplier. And if your systems enable you to find information based on these associations and connections, then there's not that much complexity, actually, even if there are a lot of systems involved.
Kurt, what's your take on this? Is it a sort of let a thousand flowers bloom approach at Chipotle, or are you trying to force people to one system? Where do you stand?
Yeah, I don't think we're ever going to get back to the point where there's one system, and the confluence, if you will, of the Internet of Things and how much data is being produced, as well as advances in machine learning and AI to help make sense of it, really go hand in hand as very, I would say, disruptive technologies. Now, I agree with Antti. I think we need to work towards an architecture or set of expectations where computing and data availability are seen as utilities. When you flip the switch, they're there and they're reliable. We're not there yet as a world. Certainly, I'm not there yet as a company, but I think that's what the end state is going to be able to unlock human potential. One of the things that I think we'll see the next advance being is near real time access to that data. It's still at the scale that it is, takes a while to process and become actionable. And as Antti said, the decentralization and democratization of data across systems that are tied together seamlessly can really be a lever for organizations that need to pivot and act quickly.
Can I ask you both, and Kurt, perhaps you continue your thought there. What are the obstacles that prevent us or are stopping us right now from getting to that world of real-time data processing? Is it technical? Is it cultural?
I think it's technical and cultural. Some of it is there's a lot of data out there that is noise and not necessarily something that can be tied to causation. And machine learning and AI inherently learn slowly at this point. So there's still some lag in terms of getting systems up to speed to help human beings source through that. The cultural part of it is still emerging field. So there aren't necessarily people graduating from university systems right now that have all the tools that they need at scale to help program some of those systems or to understand what deep data analytics means. All of that, I think, is going to accelerate and catch up. The market is certainly pushing us there. There's a premium on these technologies. There's a premium on these scales. And where those premiums exist, the gaps are going to get filled.
Antti, same question to you. What are the barriers that prevent us getting to what Kurt outlined as the end state, assuming you share that vision of where we're headed?
Yeah, there certainly are technical gaps, but I think there's a very big just cultural change that needs to happen, even in the areas where I believe pretty much all the technical gaps have been filled already. And I'm talking about just access to information, documents, other business information. That's not necessarily like huge volumes of information, but even that key critical business information that is the source for the business decisions that we make. There's a kind of a culture that it's being kept behind people in the offices. And now as everybody, so most people, especially in knowledge work companies, are working kind of independently at the time and place where they choose. We have to change the culture to making all the relevant information available in a kind of a self-serve, on-demand way. It can't be dependent on you asking your colleague in the same office or sending an email message to get something, because that colleague might be actually working in a different time zone and doesn't choose to work at the same hours as you. So it's when we free people from the limits or restrictions of a place, they actually also begin making choices of when they work, and that kind of starts a change that then the synchronous ways of communication and collaboration don't necessarily work anymore. We've seen a lot of that happen at M-Files, that kind of we have to look for new ways and kind of accept new ways of asynchronous collaboration and working together in a very different way than when we were all gathering into a meeting room to make things happen.
And to be specific on this, Antti, is this the kind of issues that you're talking about there, which are cultural more than technical? Is that things like access rights to particular types of information and the ability to make changes to documentation? Is that what you're thinking of?
Yeah, to me, it's more of a cultural thing, because the technical solutions do exist, but of course they just haven't been taken into use as broadly as they could have been. And the way I explain it to myself, that it's maybe a cultural thing, that companies, managers, leaders tend to default to keeping information still to themselves instead of defaulting to making information available to every employee in their organization, unless there is a very specific confidentiality or security reason why it shouldn't be. I'm certainly not saying that all the information can be openly available in the company, but I'm an advocate of the thinking that most of the information should be available and accessible from technical and access rights point of view to pretty much every employee in the company. And to me, the reason why that is not the case is not a technical reason; it's a cultural reason.
How about you at Chipotle, Kurt? How radical is transparency there, and has it changed?
Yeah, I think it's changed for sure. And I think that change began before the pandemic. Human beings by nature are social and collaborative. By nature, we're also change averse. And so we look at those two things together and say, if if we just focus on, are we more remote or are we more hybrid, and what does that mean, we're perhaps being short-sighted. We tend to look at it more of, are we creating a culture of innovation? And if we're creating a culture of innovation, then that means we're embracing diversity of thought, as an example. It means, to Anti's point, that, and I call it the democratization of information, that we need to give people all of the tools and data that's available to help come up with creative new ideas or creative new worlds, frankly. And so, I think if we can get to a point where we understand that um, people are better when they're well armed and working together, that it's okay to fail as part of innovation, as long as you've got a purpose that's worth fighting for, and you've got products and services that you're proud of. Then being afraid to empower people with information is really being trapped in the past.
Is there an example you can point to there of how that empowering people, perhaps at the front lines, with customer service, interacting with your customers, Kurt, where that ability to access data to see what's happening and then act on it has led to material change?
Yeah, so I'll give you a great example. We during the pandemic launched a AI personality named Pepper on our digital properties, and Pepper is designed to be able to help a guest through questions. It can be anything from, I'm vegan, what can I eat on your menu, to, hey, where's my food delivery? Or if we fell down, um, here's a problem. We had over 500,000 interactions on that bot last year. And to make that AI effective, she has to be connected to real-time data stores that know that customer, that can find the order. Just as examples, can issue a refund to the appropriate credit card if we fell down and made a mistake. Architecting that to enable Pepper was a huge endeavor for us. But now that we have all of that real-time information, we're excited about all the other things we can do with it.
I want to take the conversation on and turn to you, Antti, around training and lifelong learning. So there are, we've had a number of people, lots of people actually joining enterprises remotely and having to absorb the way that companies work during the pandemic. We have what is in some places known as the Great Resignation. We certainly have tight labour markets right now, and lifelong learning and training is part of the sort of employer response to that challenge of keeping people. What role does technology play in teaching people who are joining about companies and how they work, and in upskilling your existing workforce? So perhaps you can talk to that then, Faz.
Yeah, I think that actually ties well into what Kurt just said about kind of equipping employees or empowering them to be successful and fostering that culture of innovation. It's kind of that's really how the work life has changed. That it's for us as leaders, it's about enabling and empowering employees to be successful, and that obviously includes the learning and continuous learning part. And I wouldn't want to talk about like continuous training, because it's kind of like sounds like we're pushing that training to them. It's clearly shifted to again being something that employees also drive themselves, and our role is to provide ways for them to develop their skills. So it's a big shift from that kind of push training or learning to on-demand online learning platforms. We've implemented I think LinkedIn Learning as one of the online platforms with very good uptake here at MFile. So I'm just really excited to see how teams and managers talk about great new education courses they've taken from that selection, and then they recommend them to others. I think that's the new way. There's certainly companies need to also provide a very comprehensive online onboarding experience, but I think that's kind of a table stakes. Yeah, you need to provide that. For beyond that, if you can also provide an extensive set of learning and self-development, then I think you are doing a great job in enabling your employees to not only do what you kind of hire them to do, but to elevate themselves to the different to the next levels.
As well as employees, there's also other members of the executive team. I wonder, just in terms of learning around digital transformation, digital mindsets, what would your advice be to other members who sit around the executive team table, the rest of the leadership team? What do they need to know? What do they need to understand? What's the level of I won't say competence, but knowledge that is required? Maybe Kurt, you could talk us through that from your perspective.
Yeah, I continue to believe that the best technologies are the ones that improve human experience. And the executive teams that I'm surrounded with and work with in our partner companies are all experiencing the fundamental shift in the human experience and humanity all around them. To Anti's point, even around training, historically there was computer-based training for the last decade or so, and there was on-the-job training. Now, I think with technology and people getting comfortable with the metaverse, as an example, there's this whole new field that's simulation-based or experience-based training. Airline pilots have done this for years to get reps and be successful. That's now going across multiple industries. And if the pandemic did anything that was positive, it accelerated people's knowledge, awareness, and adoption of trying new things digitally. So some of the resistance that we may have seen in the past around not understanding the specific ROI around these changes or why these investments may be necessary for successful companies has been replaced with an eagerness to experiment and try new things and do that through the lens of humanity and human experience. So I think there's been a big shift in the eagerness and excitement around these platforms.
So is training where you see the metaverse having its first sort of instantiation within enterprises? That's
Yeah, I think it's going to be an obvious start. I don't know if it'll be first or among the first couple, but just as we saw people get comfortable being content creators and not just consumers on the internet, I think people are going to feel the same comfort as they experiment in their personal lives around things in the metaverse, having those experiences translate seamlessly into the workplace will be comfortable. 25 years ago, the technologies that were available to you at work seemed to be superior than the capabilities you had at home. And I think for the last 10 or 15 years, that's been inverted, where people feel like they have a more technology rich experience in their personal lives, be it via gaming or content creation, than at work. And now work is starting to catch up. When we talk about hybrid, I think it's more of this hybrid of the experiences and expectations you have in your personal life are now going to be woven into the fabric of what you experience in your professional life.
And it's hard not to talk about a world in which there's much more data flowing. The boundaries of the firm and the enterprise are a bit more fluid. Real-time data without worrying, as I'm sure you all do, about cybersecurity. Is there? I mean, it feels from the outside as though there's just a sort of very, very sort of samey set of prescriptions for cybersecurity. That this is a big problem. Here's how you think about it or try to resolve it. How worried should we be? What do you think enterprises should be doing differently to resolve cybersecurity concerns, or is this something you pass off to an insurer?
Well, unfortunately, it's not something we can pass on to an insurer. There's no way of taking the risk away. So yeah, it's a big topic and big concern, and there are certain types of data and information in enterprises like Chipple, for instance, that are of course very sensitive and has to be really well protected. I just want to kind of encourage that it shouldn't lead to then us being overly protective of everything and hurting the ways we can work and innovate. So kind of it's important to understand what's the data that's customer data, consumer data that needs to be protected at the highest possible level, and what's then more of a kind of a internal collaboration type of data that I mean it doesn't in the world if somebody overhears a conversation in a cafe or something. So kind of a similar types of just reasonable approaches to enabling efficient ways to collaborate regardless of place and time. Just that we don't lose that when we worry about the cybersecurity part. For the actual like protecting the most valuable information, that's a whole different discussion. But I think everybody understands that it's no longer about keeping people or the attackers out of your office or your network. It's more of that zero trust approach that you just have to validate everything everywhere, because again it's so distributed. I'm at my home here, and this could be the target of the cyber attack, so just can't trust anyone.
So I'm going to put each of you on the spot in a very unfair way in our final minute or so. So one thing that you think that participants at Innovation Week should be thinking about, what is the one thing that they have to get right in order to make a success of this world of fast-moving digital transformation? one piece of advice. And Kurt, I'm going to come to you first and then Antti to close.
Yeah, I think we just need to recognize that the world has fundamentally changed and culture is going to continue to drive innovation. And at the core of that is going to be the ability to get people information. So my advice to anybody listening to this is understand how you can collect, score, secure, and share information broadly across your enterprise, and you'll unlock the human potential of your teams.
Antti?
I very much agree with that type of let's make information available, let's share, let's be open to the maximum extent that we can, and kind of like I think the kind of a culture that leads to innovation and can foster innovation, the only kind of culture these days is an open, transparent culture that's built on trust. So if you can do things that increase trust within your organization, then you are also increasing the likelihood of everybody just doing their very best and innovating and taking the company to the place where it needs to be in the future.
Well, I wish we had more time. That's been a very lightning tour of some very big issues. Unfortunately, we are out of time. But Kurt Garner, Antti Nivola, thank you so much for joining us.